Hey, welcome to The Explainer. So, what if I told you that the biggest events shaping our world, the protests, the revolutions, even the founding of entire countries, aren't random at all? Today, we are diving deep into a theory that says they're all part of a single, invisible script, a global ceremony that's been playing out right under our noses.
And you know, this whole rabbit hole, it starts with this one line from the movie 300: Rise of an Empire. Now, the theory we're digging into today argues this isn't just some throwaway line for a movie. No, it's an instruction, one that was planted in our culture for a very, very specific reason. And that line, it leads us to the heart of the whole thing. What if the Take a Knee movement that just swept across the entire planet wasn't really a protest? What if it was actually a massive, coordinated dress rehearsal for something that's still on its way? All right, so to really get our heads around this, we have to rewind to 2020. But we need to look at it through a new lens, not as a spontaneous uprising, but maybe as a giant pre-planned performance. Think about it. This one gesture, taking a knee, it starts in Minnesota and then boom, it's everywhere. Millions of people, all doing the exact same thing. This theory suggests that this wasn't an accident. It was a mass pre-enactment designed to train us, to subconsciously teach the public a very specific defensive posture. So yeah, a rehearsal, but for what exactly? And who wrote the script? Well, this is where it gets really strange. The theory traces these instructions not just back a few years, but to a symbolic code that's been hiding in plain sight for centuries. And the source of this code is probably the last place you'd think to look. The argument is that back in 2020, a set of symbolic instructions that had been lying dormant for ages was suddenly switched on. And it's been on an American state seal since the country was born. Okay, check this out. The cry you heard on the streets in 2020 was, "Get your foot off our necks." Now look at the seal of Virginia. The motto is Sic Semper Tyrannis, which means thus always to tyrants. And what's the picture? It's literally a victor with her foot on a tyrant's neck. The theory sees this as a one-to-one match, a direct activation of that seal's hidden meaning. And this whole concept has a name, the Code of the Fallen Crown. The idea here is that the seal isn't just a cool historical drawing. No, it's an operational code for revolution. It's a symbolic instruction manual that's been sitting there for hundreds of years, just waiting for the right signal. But this code, this seal, is just one small piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. And that brings us to the core claim of this entire blueprint, that the actual founding of the United States was the first major act in this long, drawn-out ceremony. Now we get to the celestial blueprint, because the theory alleges that the country wasn't just founded on political ideas. It was a physical performance, an attempt to build a specific biblical prophecy right onto the map of the earth. And here are the instructions, right from the book of Revelation. The claim is that the founding fathers, whether they knew it or not, were literally following this passage like a blueprint to construct this exact celestial sign, but here on the ground. So how do you do that? Well, according to the theory, it maps out like this. The woman is represented by Virginia and Maryland. Think Virgin Mary. The child she gives birth to, that's Washington, D.C., literally built on land birthed from those two states. And the crown of 12 stars? That would be the 12 other original colonies. All of a sudden, a political founding looks a whole lot like a cosmic ritual. Okay, so let's piece this together. If the country's founding was the setup, and 2020 was just the rehearsal, it begs the question, right? When is the actual show? Well, the theory says we don't have to wait, because the fallout from that rehearsal at ground zero is happening right now. And that brings us to 2026. The blueprint claims that the shockwave from that 2020 rehearsal is finally making impact, and it's hitting right where it all started, Minnesota. You see, the theory doesn't see these as separate things. It draws a direct line from A to B. 2020 was the psychological prep work. 2026 is when the system at that exact spot finally starts to buckle under the pressure. It was all planned. And the theory points to recent headlines as proof. A massive financial scandal, political chaos, a governor resigning, the federal government freezing funding. These aren't just random bits of bad news. They're the impact. They are the predictable consequences that the world was trained to brace for back in 2020. It's the system breaking down right at the origin point. But here's the final twist. Just when you think you figured it out, the blueprint says that this social collapse, the one happening now, it's just another drill. Practice for something way, way bigger. So now we get to the final part of the puzzle, conditioning for collision. This is the big why. Why would anyone, or anything, as the source calls them entities, orchestrate this incredibly complex ritual over hundreds of years? It all comes down to this one master concept, the hyper-ritual. This idea frames everything we've talked about, the country's founding, the movies, the protests, the collapse, as just different stages in one giant conditioning exercise for the entire planet. And here it is, the ultimate claim. All this training, all this conditioning to take a knee and brace for impact, it was never about preparing for a social or political collapse. It was about preparing all of us for a shockwave that doesn't come from our own systems, but one that comes from the stars. Which leaves us with the one massive question that this whole blueprint is built around. If every crisis we see is just a drill, just background noise designed to train our subconscious, then what is the real impact that this whole centuries-long ritual has been preparing us for all along?